Gray are brightened by the beauty a sudden sun discloses, and the people hear us singing bread and roses.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to AUP's Labor in Motion Movie Club, where we screen the movies your boss doesn't want you to see. Today is March 18th, and I'm Jordan Thompson. I work in AUP's Education Department, and I'll be your host. I'm very glad that you've decided to watch Bread and Roses, and that you've joined us here for this discussion. AUP's Movie Club aims to bring you important films that feature working class struggles, things like unions, inclusion and diversity, and democracy at work. We want to improve awareness about these issues and how they relate to your life here in Alberta. Let me please introduce our very special guest. It would be very difficult for us to overstate the significant and vital body of cinematic achievements made by this acclaimed English filmmaker, who is a two-time winner of the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. His brand of socialist realist cinema and his ideals come through in the way that he explores social and political issues like poverty, homelessness, delinquency, and labor rights. In the 1980s, he did a lovely job of getting some trade union officials angry with him for his film Questions of Leadership. It voiced the disillusionment of rank and file workers with the labor movement. Our guest actually retired from filmmaking in 2014, but with the election of another conservative government in the UK, it prompted him to return. In his two most recent films, I, Daniel Blake, and Sorry We Missed You, together form a very searing critique of the working class struggles and hardships that we face under government austerity and because of the gig economy. He is a supporter and endorsed Jeremy Corbyn for the leadership of the Labour Party in the UK. And without any further ado, it's my great honor and a deep privilege to introduce to everyone our guest, Ken Loach. And please join me in giving him a very warm AUP welcome. Thanks for coming here, Ken.
That's very kind of you, Jordan. It's a real privilege to join you. I liked your remarks about the value of film. Unfortunately, the films that are made really reflect the industry. It's an industry where people invest money to make a profit, and the struggles of the daily lives of people, and the dramas and the comedies and the tensions and the struggles that people have are not the first choice for people making big commercial investments. So we sometimes struggle to get the films made, but I think it's really important we don't desert cinema, because it's a wonderful medium. And if you're unable to make films, and I've been hugely lucky, and we maybe talk about that, and the people are, because filmmaking is a team, and I've always worked with a wonderful group of people. But the struggle to get them made is really tricky. I've been lucky because I got a name fairly early on, notorious rather than anything else, but a name. And many people now, brilliant filmmakers, just don't get the chance. But anyway, I really appreciate your opening comments, and look forward to the conversation.
What's the story behind this film?
Well, it was extraordinary. It's very much down to the writer, Paul Laverty. And Paul's began as a lawyer, and he got fed up with the ordinary daily life of a lawyer, and he went to Nicaragua during the Contra War, the attack on the Sandinista government, and worked as a human rights lawyer there. He was in the war zone in the north of Nicaragua near Esteli, and recorded the atrocious campaign of the Contra, the terrorist group sponsored by the United States, paid for, funded, organized. It was the state's action under cover of right-wing local people or right-wing elements. And when he came back, he got in touch, and I didn't, we hadn't met, and he said, let's do a film about Nicaragua. So we did in the end, but I got a couple of jobs before that. And while he was waiting, Paul said, I'll do a course on film writing because I kind of feel I ought to know something about it. So I said, well, you're a writer, don't worry. But anyway, he went on a course to Los Angeles. And it was a very prestigious course. But of course, it didn't tell him anything about writing. And to be a film writer, you just need to be a writer. I mean, the whole drama about how you need to set out the scripts and everything, and it's kind of nonsense, really. You tell the truth in your writing, and that's all you need. So Paul tended not to go to the classes, but he'd learned Spanish in Nicaragua, and he finally was drawn to the Mexicans and the other people from Central America who were working in Los Angeles. And he started to go, it was on the buses, he didn't have a car, so he traveled by bus, and of course that's where he met them. And he started to hear their stories, and I think they must have been intrigued by this Scotsman who spoke a kind of rather bad Spanish, and he got to them and went with them in the morning, the early mornings, when they were going to the offices to clean them, before dawn, really. And that's where he really heard their stories. And then he rang and said, look, there's a real story here about exploitation, but also about union organization and the transformation of unions from a right-wing reactionary body that simply defended the small group of people who were in work, and really ignored immigrants, and particularly immigrants without papers. And then there was the transformation of the union, and so that was really exciting. And anyway, he was in touch, and then he wrote a script, and we managed finally to get finance, and there we were. There's a lot to say about filmmaking in Los Angeles. I found it's the worst place in the world to make a film. It was easier in Nicaragua. The cars might run out of petrol, or you might have difficulty organizing, but people's hearts were warm and generous, and their commitment was brilliant. In Los Angeles, it's an industrial process, and we were very much a European film on location. And because we were quite modest in scale, we weren't seen as very important, which suited us. But it was some stories from the filmmaking in Los Angeles that actually turned the idea of the Americans like to propose about themselves, turn those ideas on their head. But maybe we can come to that. But that's how it came about. Paul Laverty, brilliant writer, learned Spanish in Nicaragua, traveling with the Mexicans on buses.
You mentioned, Ken, that some of the ideas about the filmmaking were turned on their head. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe one of those particular experiences that you had while making the film?
Yes. Well, we found it's interesting, but one of the issues is about the unions, because everybody in the business in Britain said you'll have a huge problem with the unions in Los Angeles. And Rebecca O'Brien, the producer, and I and Paul, but led by Rebecca, met all the unions. And we said, look, we're a small European film. We work in a kind of slightly different way, in that we have people with real connections to the parts in real life. We try to have them in our film so that it feels authentic. And the actors at first were very skeptical, but then their union was brilliant and really helped. And we invited them along to the shooting, and instead of being treated as an enemy, which I think most film companies do, we treated them as friends and as fellow union members. And they were really helpful. And the unions by and large were good. The Teamsters were the most difficult, and they were the drivers. And much to our surprise, we always had one more driver than we had vehicles. And we were never quite sure what the reason for that was. But they were okay. They were good lads. What is different for us to work in the States was that because there is so much work and because it's restricted to the unions will tend to be exclusive, as opposed to what I think unions should be, which is inclusive. So hard to break in, and people would leave the film without a word, and they'd work with you one day and they wouldn't be there the next. Now, for us, that's a kind of alienation that we don't experience, really. If you're working with us, you're a comrade, you work with us, and you're there for the duration. So that is interesting how a harsh industry brings with it a kind of alienation from the actual work. And that was interesting. The other thing that was interesting was that the Americans like to present themselves as, we kick ass, we've no time for bureaucracy. We tell it how it is, and we don't put up with silly bureaucratic rules. Nothing could be further from the truth. The location manager was a lovely man, nice man, but he was in all kinds of troubles because we would film. I mean, in Europe, we just film on the road, on the pavement, and catch life as it happens. There, we wanted to film outside an office building in the commercial sector in Los Angeles, which is just full of tall skyscrapers. And he got permission for us to do this. And we were outside an office building. There was just in the background, it wasn't identified. And we started filming, and there was a demonstration by some of the janitors. They were marching up and down. And we'd been filming for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and the PR person, public relations person, came out of the building and told us that we had to stop. And the location manager came to me very worried. He said, "I'm afraid we're going to have to stop." And I said, "But why? You have permission, you have written permission from the appropriate person." He said, "Yes, but they are claiming that we are interfering with their right to do business by causing a distraction. We will interfere with their profits. And therefore, as location manager, will be reported to the appropriate body in the town, in the local municipality, whoever gives us the agreements. And because of that, I shan't get permission again." He said, "You can continue because you have permission. But if you do, it'll affect my future work." And that's a kind of bureaucratic interference that we wouldn't accept in Britain. But out of deference to him, because we didn't want to get him into trouble, I said, "Fine, no, of course, we'll support you." But it was very inconvenient, and we meant we had to go somewhere else and not have the buildings close. So that power of that corporate power to override the permissions, everything that had been done properly. But that was shocking. And we wouldn't have that in Britain. I don't know if it would be that bad in Canada.
We reached out to some of our friends at SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign here in Canada. And I had wanted them to join us at this event, but they couldn't come. They were busy. But what they did is they recorded video greetings and a question for you. And so I'd like to go ahead and show that first video from one of our special friends just now.
Hello, Ken. It's Diego Mendez, actually in Hamilton, Ontario these days, and probably doesn't remember me, and that's okay. But we briefly shared the stage at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2010. Well, Ken, Paul Laverty, and Michael Moore were generous enough to make time to invite Justice for Janitors on stage to have a brief discussion. So we've come a long way since then. We're still organizing. We now have over 10,000 J4J members across Canada. There's members in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Ontario, in BC, and even a few bargaining units in Alberta. And again, we've come a long way from a situation where workers were, in many cases, making less than minimum wage to now a situation where workers have, most of them anyway, including workers who work part-time, family benefits, medical benefits, including dental, including vision care, and most recently in a round in negotiations in both Ottawa and Toronto, we've been able to win a retirement pension for workers. So things are improving, and it's an important campaign. The work is still needed, and we still have more to do. So the Justice for Janitors campaign actually lives on across Canada, and we continue to do the work. So what special role can the arts play in terms of raising awareness and organizing, and do we use it enough?
Well, it's partly what I said right at the beginning is that to get screenings in commercial cinemas, which is what we've been on periphery of. I mean, most of our films are usually shown in what we call art houses. Well, it varies. I mean, the last two films we've got into the multiplexes that you mentioned at the beginning. I, Daniel Blake, and Sorry We Missed You. But in Europe, we get into the mainstream cinemas. In Britain, it's harder, but which is a pity, because the cinema in cinemas where you sit in an audience is a wonderful medium. You can find a story that is absolutely true, true in its ideas, in the experiences people have, but by making it personal, by sharing the struggles of individuals, you can draw people into it, and people will identify their own struggles through the characters in the films. And I think that's in a way is how we learn, isn't it? It's through learning. It's with solidarity with people in a recognizable situation, and the complexity of it. And I think that's important, because there's a big difference between a real film and something which is a straight polemic, or propaganda. So yes, cinema films, brilliant if you can do it. I think also the internet has meant that now people can make short films, and they work as polemic. I mean, they work as just a crystallize an argument with evidence, and there are many, many ways of doing that, and people can do that themselves. And I think that's really important. I'm the wrong generation for it, really. I can barely turn on my phone, but for people who have grown up with that, with the internet and with making those short films, yes, use them by all means. Music, songs, theatre, writing, pamphlets, leaflets, cartoons. I mean, they can all play their part so that we create a culture of resistance. And I think that's what's important. And whatever the individual contribution, whether it's visual art, whether it's writing, whether it's something a film you make on a phone or whatever, we need a culture of resistance, where we share the ideas. And I think what's really important is those ideas. And for me, what's important is we don't just resist. We don't simply say this situation is intolerable because of A, B, C, and D. We say we can change it. We have power. We have together organized. We have strength. And I think that's what we often miss on the left. Is we're very good at saying this is what is wrong. We're not so good at saying this is the power we have. Because that's the point that the right wing, the mainstream media will never use. The mainstream's media image of the working class is as victims. And they're often they'll talk quite sentimentally about that. They'll describe the poverty, and they'll describe the hardship, and they'll describe the problems of a single mother or sometimes even an immigrant with no papers waiting to be deported or whatever. There's a liberal conscience, but what they will never say is that together we have strength. And that's what I think our culture, however we express it, has really got to encapsulate, because we do have strength. Organized, we have strength. Individually, we're picked off, like individuals, but together we have strength. So that's what we really have to. That's the message we've got to get across, because that's what they don't like.
Ken, I want to invite one of our AUP members to go ahead and ask her question to you. I think she has a comment and a question. So I'll turn it over to Federica. Federica, welcome.
Hello, Jordan. Thank you very much. Greetings, Mr. Loach. It is really a pleasure and a privilege to meet you, albeit virtually today. And I would like to take this opportunity to express my deepest admiration to you for eloquently depicting justified struggles, and at the same time for inspiring your viewers to stand up for what is right. So this is my question. Bread and Roses seems to strike a delicate balance between the optimism of the successful union bid versus the remaining grim realities for so many characters. And I wanted to ask you, how did you decide to weight the balance?
That's an interesting question, Federica. Really nice to meet you. And hello. I guess what we always try and do, and Paul Laverty is very good at this, and it's what we talk about right at the outset, and we talk a lot about it, is finding the essential struggle. What are the essential elements to the struggle? And then finding characters who embody that struggle, and the conflict between them is, because there has to be, it's drama. I mean, drama is built on conflict, and there's conflict in all kinds of ways. There's the obvious conflict here with the employers, and the employers that you never see, because we never see them. We never see the real corporate power. We see the consequences of their power, but we never see them. We don't put faces to them. So there's that conflict going on in the background. But there's many, I mean, anybody who's ever been involved in industrial action, in a strike, in organizing labor, know that there are conflicts. There are conflicts with the immediate employer. There's the conflicts with working class people who take the part of the employer within the factory or the organization, whatever it is. There's the man in charge who himself is working class, and yet he's organizing for corporate power. There's that conflict, and then we felt the central. Well, Paul's thought was the central characters. There's got to be a conflict there as well, and that's the conflict of someone who is, in a way, is quite naive. Comes into the business, works as a cleaner, sees that this is an appalling, oppressive, exploitative work. And her sister, who's had the harshest experience imaginable and has retreated from militancy. She's retreated into just saying, all I can do is care for my family. I can't do anything else. And it leads her actions are quite backward, in that she doesn't want to get involved. She's in fear. She's actually had to sell herself, literally, to get across the border, to find work, and she's nothing left. And you don't realize that until the end. And so it's that conflict as well, which is a very, I mean, it's hugely emotional for the two sisters. And we felt that was really important as well, because it says otherwise, if you just have a great bunch of happy militant Mexican workers and all they've got to do is strike. Well, no, the price people pay is desperate. It can reduce them, it reduces their capacity. And so it's to have compassion for people whose energy is gone through the different kinds of exploitation they've experienced. And in a way, that became the heart of the film, because it's too easy to make a film about corporate power. We know what bastards they are, but that delicacy between the two sisters, in a way, was what the film more and more centered on. There's a story behind the big scene, but I'll save it till later.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Question, Federica. Let me turn it over to Ferris briefly, who's been taking lots of questions on Q&A.
What do you have to say about the challenges ahead? The media is less and less capable of holding people in power to account. Workers themselves are moving away from organized labor and towards things like populism and fascism. What advice do you have to give to move towards a world with greater equity and greater justice?
I mean, the mainstream media has never been good at holding power to account. They have a hard right face, and they have a sort of slightly softer liberal face, but they never hold them to account, really. How do we progress? Well, I think the lesson from Justice for Janitors is a good place to start, because, as I said, when the it seemed to us, and if I remember right, the union was transformed, because before it was transformed by a new group of organizers. Before the transformation, it was quite a right-wing, old-fashioned union, and it's Spanish. I think you hinted, Jordan, that the Spanish was not allowed in union meetings. Well, they were trying to organize people from Central America, ban Spanish from the meetings, and you've no chance. So that changed. And the key thing that I think we need to learn now, that Justice for Janitors did, was it wasn't just the union, it was the community. And the community recognized the exploitation, just as communities recognize now the exploitations in the gig economy, no job security, people doing 2 jobs, people having families and not being there to care for them, and a big increase in poverty, and a big increase in inequality. So alongside the extreme poverty, there is the great riches for a few, the rise of far-right politics, which draws people in because they say simple things, the easiest things. Blame the person, they blame the poorest person, blame the immigrant, blame the disabled, blame the unemployed, we saw Trump do that, and we've had it in Britain. And our answer to that has to be starting with people's needs, as the SEIU did in their campaign for Justice for Janitors. And it was grassroots organizations that joined in with the unions. And that's a really tough thing for old-fashioned unions to accept or to look for. But I think that's a way forward now, because I don't know if it's the same for you, but in our communities, we have a charity for providing poverty food, have a charity for swapping, so an unemployed plumber or an unemployed building worker will go and exchange his work for an unemployed electrician or something. People with skills, barter their work, and it's a charity for that. There's a charity for people in debt. There's charities for homelessness, big charities for homelessness. And to find those grassroots campaigns and join them with the union struggle, I think that's really a way forward. It's what Jeremy Corbyn tried to do in the Labour Party that you mentioned in your introduction, Jordan. And he was massively successful. It turned the Labour Party from a small party into the biggest party in Western Europe. The biggest party, 250,000 people joined because of Jeremy Corbyn. And his his political assassination, because that's what it was, is probably not for this meeting, but that's because Labour, with a transformative programme, which was going to give union rights to everyone in employment would have got full union rights from day one. They'd have transformed the laws against trade unions. They would have restored collective bargaining. They would have outlawed insecure work, bogus self-employment. So that everybody had like an 8-hour day or whatever, 35-hour week or whatever it was, with a minimum wage based on that. So a whole range of rights, and the whole establishment destroyed that possibility. And I think its importance goes beyond Britain, because it says something about our capacity to change society electorally. And if we're going to, we have to pursue elections, of course, but if we're going to pursue it, we've got to do it in the knowledge of what happened when in Britain we got that close. We almost won the 2017 election. I think we almost won it. And that's when the establishment, including the BBC, including the liberal press, said we cannot tolerate this. This is a real threat to the established order, to the market economy and private corporate power, and they destroyed it. So that's a really interesting lesson. And it relates to trade unions, of course, because trade unions need a political voice. It's not enough that we say, right, we want a wage increase, right, we want to defend our jobs, right, we don't want bullying at work and so on. Of course, we've got to fight that. But to make the changes in society, we need a political voice. And finding that political voice is complicated. And please look at the lesson that we learned very harshly in Britain.
Ken, before I lose the opportunity, I do want to show you the second video greeting that we got and just tell you the background a little bit about it. One of AUP's negotiators used to be an organizer at SEIU, and she was involved in a campaign at the University of Alberta in 2010 to support the workers of Be Clean. This is one of those subcontracting companies that hires, in this case, workers under a very exploitative program. It's called the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. And one of the former janitors, Tariq, told me last week that she remembered your film Bread and Roses because SEIU showed it to them during their campaign. It turns out that she was illegally fired for standing up for their rights, and her coworkers actually had to sue their employer to get back tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid overtime. It was wage theft. So I'll play for you her greetings and a question that she sent you.
My name is Tariq Accord. I was involved with 2010 for a J for janitors, Justice for Janitors, University of Alberta, and that's where I was involved with for the campaign for Speak Up Into Your Rights. So first, that's where I started. For organizing, it's not really easy job to do that, and you need you have to have a first strong feeling and motion, and also know your rights and care of others. That's where can motivate you to do and stand up and keep going what you're doing. And that's where my experience is to have a voice at work. Especially janitors, it's not easy because most of the janitors, they don't speak English, and most of them they don't write. So even myself, so it wasn't easy to organize. And my question is always there's organizing for, you know, and no matter where is the organized, but let's say my example is J for Janitors. When we had it, always there's emotion going on when we have to campaign, but when the campaign, we get success, we had the union, but how to motivate again to keep that motion up, because there's employees always feel down after that and feel like they didn't make good choices in first place. So to do that, that's my question.
Wow, that's another tricky question. Actually, really nice to meet Tariq and hear her. And just before, I must pay tribute to the two SEIU people, officers who were the most help. They were terrific people. And I think they progressed quite vitally so out of the union. John O'Shafer, who was with us most of the time, brilliant guy, and Paul is still in touch with Jono, and lovely man, funny, brilliant organizer. And also Rosario Sainz, who I think has gone on to much greater things, but again, a brilliant organizer. And they, both of them did exactly what Tariq asked, which is to keep people motivated. And yes, it is difficult. I mean, I guess what motivates people is reminding them of the injustice, really, and any mention of a victory. You know, I mean, people will fight if they feel they can win. If they feel they're going to lose, then it's difficult. You know, and that again is the skill of the organizer to get a victory, a little victory, and judging how far you can go. So you don't, if you're really winning, is always the question of, do we press on or do we settle for what we've won so far? So they're difficult, as well as the principle that you fight for in the union, you know, union rights, a secure wage, no exploitation, no bullying, the job security. You fight for those. But you've also got to judge it tactically, and on the tactics you use, how you put the employer on the back foot, and for that you need a strong union, and you need a strong union that will use its power. And the problem we've got again in Britain is we've got massive unions, and they all have big offices, you know, great offices, plate glass, you know, the best specifications for the building you can imagine. It could be a big corporation, and too much of the subs, too much of the union subscriptions go to maintaining the buildings and paying big salaries to people at the top. The money needs to go to the organizers, to organize, to be there when people start work at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, early morning, to be there at night when they knock off, to be available when there's a problem. The union's money needs to be with the organizers at the grassroots. And judging only from the British experience, the big offices don't persuade anybody. It's the organizers who speak in the everyday language of the workers that will organize, and that's where the strength is. So I think that will keep people motivated, but it's a huge problem. Of course, we know it's a huge problem.
I'd like to know if you could tell us what it means to you personally to act from a place of principles, and especially to show solidarity, even when doing that comes at a personal cost.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess, you know, when you're in the business, you can pursue all different kinds of films, but Hollywood hasn't been beating a path to my door, don't worry. I mean, there's no huge sacrifice. I mean, we've been immensely lucky just to be able to keep working. You know, we've done a film every 18 months or so. For one or two reasons. One is working with the brilliant writers, and Paul and I have worked together for a quarter of a century. So that's been a massive stroke of luck, and a good producer who finds the money. I mean, the other thing is we're cheap, you know. we're pretty cheap. I mean, we're probably a cheap gig. So, and if people make their money back, then we can keep going. And I mean, the delight in filmmaking is in the people you find, and the excitement of working with people who are very close to the stories we tell, try to tell. And in Bread and Roses, for example, I mean, the people who play the part of the janitors, of the cleaners, most of them are cleaners. And they come from, you know, Honduras and Salvador and the Central American countries, and they were a joy, you know, absolute joy. And it's, I mean, filmmaking should be a pleasure, because so many people try to get into it, and it has to be exciting. It has to be a joy, and making that happen is the great excitement. And we, you know, if you're working, you get decent wages. I mean, we've been incredibly lucky. So no other form of filmmaking would have been half so rewarding in so many ways. And you meet just wonderful people, and the excitement of making the films is its great reward. The director's job really is to make the audience believe what they're seeing. And I found really early on that most films don't do that. Most films are shot in a way that suits the accountants. You know, if you keep going back into a location throughout the film, they'll ask you to shoot all the scenes in that location, all out of sequence, out of order. So we do the opposite. We start the filming on day one, right at the beginning of the story. So we started in this one with the girl being brought in by, you know, with a coyote in through
the border crossing.
Illegally, yeah, the border crossing. And we finished right at the end. The last scene was when she was sent back to Mexico. And nobody knows how it's going to end. You know, nobody knows the story. So a surprise, we film a surprise. And so most of the people didn't know about all the things that were going to happen till they actually happened. And then it's a mixture of Paul's lines and people's genuine surprise and response. So
are you saying, just let me clarify, that the actors themselves didn't know the entire script, that you kind of revealed them as you went?
No, they didn't know. No.
Wow. I can see how that translated into the experience that we see on the screen, because we do see a very authentic, yeah.
Yeah, and it keeps, I mean, there's an excitement to it then. And if you rehearse something, you know, 6 weeks in advance, it's lost its power to surprise you. And the most important thing you have as a director is the instinct of the actors, you know. So you have to cherish that and make certain that it functions when the camera's turning. You know, if you have a great rehearsal, when you come to do it, it's flat. So I learned really early on, don't rehearse, just make everyone absolutely prepared, so that when they've got a lot of lines to say, they pretty well know them. And we stick to Paul's writing very closely, but finding the sense of spontaneity is really important. And the big scene, when the younger sister believes that the older sister she's sold out the strike, she's set up some people to be victimized, absolutely shocking.
Right, Maya comes to confront Rosa.
Yes, when Maya,
and then Rosa makes a big reveal about what she's had to do to sacrifice for her family.
Yes, exactly. Well, Maya didn't know what she was going to say. She just thought, she was out for herself. She just wanted to make more money. She wanted to get promotion. She didn't know what had happened. And Elpidia, who played Rosa, before the film began, she'd done some research herself into, you know, the brothels on the border, the whole, just what had happened to people in real life. So that she had a vivid picture of that in her mind. Pilar Padilla, who played Maya, didn't know what about that. She just went in rage. And when Paul wrote the script, he thought this is going to split them. He thought the two sisters, what they are so far apart, they will just split. But actually what happened when Pilar played it, and because as Maya, she herself didn't know this. She hadn't read the script. She didn't know it. And I just said, look, just go in. And I gave her the first bit when she expressed her outrage. And she didn't have the rest of the scene. So when she heard Elpidia, who played Rosa, just tell her the story. And they both cracked up, really. I mean, it was very emotional. And of course, it was very quick to shoot. I mean, it was all over in a couple of hours or so. And when it finished, of course, it actually brought them together, because their instinct was actually, Maya's instinct was to rush to her and hold her. It wasn't to leave. So we had to slightly rewrite the end of the script because of that. But it's fascinating how people respond. And that was the truth of it. That was the truth of it. What they filmed was the truth. And I think if we'd rehearsed it and pre-planned it, they wouldn't have had that freedom to tell the truth about the situation as they experienced it, So it was, that's the excitement of filmmaking, So yeah, I wouldn't swap that for any number of Hollywood hits, to be honest.
So very important. Ken, I want to let Ferris tell us about some more questions that have come in from the audience. So Ferris?
Yeah.
Actually, we have a really good one that came in quite a bit earlier from Stephanie, and it is saying that they really enjoyed the film. And can you please tell us a bit more about your own experiences organizing or with direct actions or political engagement that may have kind of radicalized you or made you who you are?
Well, God, I go back a long way, you see. I mean, my family was a very ordinary working class family. We weren't. I mean, my mother was the daughter of a tailor who had his shop, so she was in a way, in our terms, low middle class. My father was an electrician who worked in a factory, but he did quite well. So we had quite a comfortable life, albeit a working class life. And the big change, the big revelation for me was when I went to university. And well, the first thing that began to really see life was when I was 19 in the late 1950s. We had to do national service, where you do 2 years in the military, and I was in the Air Force, and had to learn to shoot to kill very badly. I couldn't aim straight, so they fixed that for me, so I passed. But you're in a billet with 21 other lads, and that for 2 years, that's a salutary experience. From a boy who'd had quite a sheltered life in a selective boys' school, and so living with 21 other lads from all walks of life, from people who are desperately poor, some of them. That was an experience. So then you start to see a bigger picture, and then go straight from that to university, to the oldest university in Britain, Oxford University. And in the 50s, that was still a very privileged place. And most of the men, it was mainly men, of course. There were some few women, but not many. Mainly men were there from the best schools, the posh, we call them public schools. They're not public, they're private. The most expensive private schools. They had their own cars. They had, expensive girlfriends who came from London every weekend. It was a different lifestyle. And to see wealth like that, having spent 2 years, just alongside just very ordinary working class lads, you realize the class structure of society. And then other formative experience in the 1960s, which was a very political decade, and the emergence of the new left. And the new left was anti-Moscow, it was anti-Stalinist, and of course anti-capitalist. And one of the slogans was neither Washington nor Moscow. You know, it was against corporate power, and it was against the Stalinist deformation of the socialist ideal. And a number of left groups began then, and it was a decade of political militancy, and I was very involved in the groups then. And there were factory occupations, there was very political student movement in the 60s. I was no longer a student, but very connected to that. There were the May events in France, in Paris, in '68. And the politics, it was sexy to be on the left then. It's not so sexy now. And anyway, different generation now. But in those days, that was the place to be. It was, and a lot of us were politicized then. And those key ideas that we learned then. I mean, we would go to meetings and of a political group, small political group, and you'd be told, right, this week you're going to read, I don't know, about the one of the main socialist texts. You know, maybe a text by Trotsky or by Marx or Lenin, you know, the role of the party or whatever it was going to be. You would read it, and Friday night you're going to discuss it, and you'd be questioned. And I'd been a student, but I mean, I hadn't read like this. You'd be questioned on it, and have you read it? And woe betide you if you hadn't read it. And we were guys in our late 20s, early 30s, but the discipline of that, learning the basic fundamentals of socialism, of a class society, of the fundamental conflict between the ruling class and the working class, the function of the state, the function of the military, and the function of the judiciary, the function in now of the media. This gives you a clarity, I think, and a clarity of analysis that, if you can hang on to it, illuminates politics for the rest of your life. And that was our good fortune, my good fortune of our generation. We read the books, and if you don't, I can't read them so well now. The eyesight's crap, but if you read the books, read them, because that's where you learn the bones of society, and understanding that the essential conflicts that you will always meet. And it's very interesting that I was talking earlier about the attack on when the left took over the Labour Party. So many people were surprised. Well, if you've learned politics, you know not to be surprised. You know, this is what they will do. This is the limits of electoral politics. That electoral politics, without a strong social movement to support it, so that when it is threatened, there's a social movement, an organized working class that will say, no, this is our victory and you're not taking it away. We didn't have that. We just had a few good elected politicians. And without the social movement, it was never going to win. You know, so I think that was my good fortune. And then throughout that, of course, you learn a lot as life, you know, you understand the right wing of the Social Democrats. It was no surprise really when Thatcher came in and removed the gains, most of the gains that we had in the post-war settlement, because that's what capital had to do. To restore the power of capital, it had to destroy the unions, you know? So we have to expect that. And you mentioned the film Questions of Leadership, which was about the right-wing leadership of trade unions who had colluded in this destruction of what we call the welfare state. You have to expect that, you know? So I mean, that's, I guess, has been I worked with one writer called Jim Allen, brilliant writer. He'd been a dock worker, he'd been a miner, he'd been a building worker, and he used to go to building sites in order to form a union branch and then get sacked and move on to the next site as a casual worker. Brilliant writer. And he said, without the politics, you don't have a map and a compass. You know, a political analysis is the map and the compass that will guide you to understand the political struggles. And that's what's so vital. And I think, and obviously you still make mistakes all the time, but at least you have a map, you know how society is structured. You know the conflict is inevitable and it's inexorable, and they will never give up because they can't, because their system depends on private profit, and that depends on exploiting labor. That's a given. So we take that for granted, and I think that's if we can learn anything, we have to learn that.
I'm just curious, you mentioned a couple names of authors. If there's one particular book that you felt was formative, or that you think that we should all read so that we have that political grounding and the mapping that you refer to, what would it be?
Well, there's so many good books and so many great historians. I mean, Howard Zinn is the great historian for the States and North America, and his book on the working class history of the
People's History of America.
Yeah, brilliant book. But for me, because I read it when I was young, it was Isaac Deutscher's biography of Trotsky. It's a 3-volume work. Isaac Deutscher, brilliant writer, but it tells the story of Trotsky and the struggle with Stalin, and that definitive struggle when the possibilities of the October Revolution, the 1917 revolution, were lost, that could have transformed the world, and of course didn't. It led to a dictatorship, and it led to a terrible killings and the rest. But it wasn't inevitable. And this is the great myth of the right wing and the establishment. That try a revolution, it always ends in death. Well, it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to. And the possibility of that, again, that's the light at the end of the tunnel, that possibility. So that book, Isaac Deutscher's 3-volume biography of Trotsky. Another short book, I mean, one of Trotsky's, many other books apart from Trotsky, but since we're talking of him, very interesting pamphlet really called The Transitional Program, which is about how we get from here to there, and the demands that we need to make. Because his idea is you can't demand the socialist state from where you are now, because nobody believes you, and it's a myth, it's a fantasy, it's never land. But right. What you demand is something that is absolutely right, like secure employment, like a wage that you can bring a family upon, you can get a house or a home, you can put food on the table, you can you're not going to get the sack tomorrow. You've got education for your children. You've got health when you're sick. You've got a pension when you're old. Basic demands. The system can't satisfy them. It's constantly cutting them back, constantly saying you can't have that. No labor rights. But they're reasonable demands. Everyone can accept them. But in demanding them, you expose the system. The system's incapacity to provide them, and then that leads you on to take political power, and then you have to consider how to do that. But it takes you forward, a transitional demand. But there's lots of books, lots of great books, Jordan.
So, in your experience, what's the best starting point when introducing activists or workers who are just getting involved in this kind of thing? How do you communicate these ideas to them?
Again, it's starting where people are. I mean, it's finding what they feel is unjust and endorsing it, isn't it? Whether it's just bad treatment by someone in charge of their work, by the ill treatment of another worker they feel sympathetic to, whether it's the injustice of the value of their work compared to the wages they get. It's just their difficulties, I think. I think that always has to be the starting point. But I'm sure that as good organizers. I mean, that's the base of trade union organizing, isn't it? Is listening, really. I mean, it's what filmmaking is about. You have to listen. I mean, you don't go into, you know, like you never go into a situation knowing the answers. You go and listen and respect the people you're talking to. Really, I think probably nothing puts people off more than somebody coming in and wagging their finger at them and telling them what they need to do. I mean, I think it begins by listening and finding what they care about and what they feel is wrong, and then helping to find a way that it becomes the union problem. Because the great difficulty people have got is that, yeah, there's something wrong, but if I speak about it, I'm going to get the sack, you know? And I think it's always making certain that the union will speak for them and protect them. And I think that I work in a business, in an industry that is almost entirely freelance and very exploited. You know, young people will come in and they'll want to work, and production companies will say, well, you can do some work for us, but we won't pay you. It'll be good for your CV. You know, it'll be good for you to put on your experience, you know. Meantime, they can't live. They can't live. So the work goes to people whose parents can afford to keep them. So the union, when people are protesting against that, you know, the union's got to say, look, we will fight that for you. We will name those employers. We will tell union members not to work with those employers. And then they're protected, you know. But I think it's knowing that people will be protected, finding what they care about, and then working with them, I think. But you know all that.
You know, I really wanted to ask you about this last scene in the film, actually. It was a scene that struck me. It's when the janitors march into the office tower and they occupy the lobby. You've referenced how, you know, during your formative years, there was a lot of things happening like that, factory occupations. After some confusion and action on the part of the security guards, we see riot police marching in. This is very frightening, especially when you consider the overreaction and state violence that's possible, and that this was filmed even before the terrorist acts of 9/11, which provoked the massive, you know, militarization of the police forces. And it was before the anti-globalization movement really picked up things in the early 2000s, and we saw cities like Seattle and Quebec City, where there was militarized police reaction to the protests by people. Here in Alberta, just last year, the government actually passed a law called Bill 1, the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. And it's all about criminalizing dissent and intimidating mostly Indigenous protesters and workers who want to stand up for justice. So my question is this, that scene in your film, Bread and Roses, it was foreshadowing in a very prescient way the increased state and police violence that we're facing today. I want to ask you, what should we do about it?
Wow, well, it's a big issue, that, isn't it? I mean, I think it's a big issue. Again, you need a political voice really there. You've got to have a political voice as well as an industrial one. It depends how strong the union is, doesn't it? I mean, and how militant people are. If people are up for it, and it can become a cause that a lot of other people will sign up for. I mean, we found it on a number of occasions where the police are heavy-handed, and then the support goes towards those people who are the victims. But that's not a position you want to put union members in. So I think we've, you know, there's got to be inventive ways of making it look ridiculous what they do, and it's judging the tactics, isn't it, very carefully. I mean, it's difficult for me to say. I mean, every situation is different. But I think it's making the point, you know, without putting union members in danger as an organizer. I think that you have to do that in a way. That's part of the contract with members, isn't it? You know, support the union. You're not going to suffer for it because and I mean, there may be a few who are so committed they will do something which attracts attention and works, but it's a question of judging the tactics and being inventive, finding ways to make the employers, the police, whoever it is, make them look ridiculous rather than get yourself beaten on the head. A sense of humor can work wonders, really. I mean, there's some great ideas, aren't there? There's a classic photograph of people who put flowers in the end of their rifles wherever they are, if they're armed, or I mean, there's images, aren't there? That I mean, I think people can have an eye to the pictures that will go around that will go across the country, there's I mean, there was a great one from the miners' strike on the worst day of the strike, when all the police were lined up with riot shields, with their helmets, with their sticks, with some on horseback, and in front of them a miner paraded, and he just got a t-shirt, and he was big, his stomach was hanging over his shorts, and he had a tiny little policeman's helmet on his head, and he was very funny, and he walked up and down and pretended to inspect them, and even the police had to start smiling, and it didn't stop them beating the miners to hell afterwards, but that image makes them look stupid, and that if there's images that can ridicule them, it's worth something, because it's a weapon. Comedy can be a weapon, and ridicule can be a weapon. But I think it's judging tactics, isn't it? On the day is tricky.
Yeah.
Some people don't know the role of police in labor disputes, especially the history, or maybe they think that the kind of the role of police being on the sides of the boss is kind of a historical one. What do you think in the present day the role of police in our society, especially when it comes to workers and workers' rights, is?
Well, the police they're an arm of the state, to say the obvious things. The state is, one, I forget who it was who said the state is the modern state is the executive of the ruling, which it is. I mean, it's there to maintain the interests of those in power, with power, economic power, and so that's a fundamental lesson. But I think we just got to keep telling our stories, our history is littered with stories of big strikes that are getting successful and the police come in, so we just got to tell our history, and just tell the stories from the past. But I think nothing teaches people like their own experience, I mean, as you say, people can, because the police can be, have a very valuable role as well. I mean, they do protect you from, if you've been robbed, they'll help you, particularly if you're the right color, and because we've discovered to our cost there's an endemic racism in the police force in Britain. It will be sexist as well. On the other hand, sometimes you will get protection from it. So it's complicated. If you're in trouble, yes, you have to go for support, and you will, most of the time you will get it. And a lot of them will be our family men and family women and will be helpful. But when they're instructed to break a strike, they will break it, And people are otherwise good people, nice people, help you when you're in trouble. If you're on strike, they're on the other side, and that's a hard lesson to learn, because, here, and I guess it's the same for you, where our police are quite friendly on the streets. They're not like other countries where they're not friendly. They can be very friendly on the streets. tell you the time, show you the way, and nice people most of the time. But when you're on strike, they play for the other team.
Ken, I tried counting your film and TV credits and I lost count. I think there's at least 36 films listed on Wikipedia. Among all your work, if you were forced to recommend one, something that you cherish or hold dear, it might be difficult to hold one above the others, but what would you like us to see? What would you recommend we pick to watch?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the films are like your children. You can't have favorites really. And you remember the nice people you were with, really. But well, there were. I mean, the ones I've done with Paul Laverty have been brilliant. So we did one about the Irish War of Independence and the Civil War, called "The Wind That Shakes the Barley." And I mean, I can't say they're any good. I mean, they might be a pile of rubbish for all I know. But it was a good film to do. And we did one about the Spanish Civil War as well, called Land and Freedom, which was very touching. I did a film early on that was always very special to us called Kess. In 1968, we shot it. And it was
by the British Film Institute as one of the top 10 most important films in Britain.
Oh, well, yeah, well, there were. I think I got it on account of the age, really. And but it's a lovely film to make anyway. A boy who trains a kestrel. I mean, he's a total failure at school, failure in everything. But he's got this extraordinary talent for training a kestrel. And nobody knows about it, and nobody will ever know about it. But we know, And so that was a nice film to do. And I, Daniel Blake, the one 2 years ago, about the guy who's he's ill, but the state tells him he has to work, and it's about his friendship with a single mother in the north of England. So that was a nice film to do. But they're all, we've been lucky, really. Met wonderful people. So if anybody's interested, it'd be really nice if they would see the odd one. But
your project, is there another film in the works, Ken?
I don't know. Well, we had an enforced idleness for a year, and when you get very old, it's like having an old car in the garage. If you wheel it out, you're afraid the engine won't start again. So I'm in that situation at the moment, Jordan.
Yeah.
Still in the garage and anxious about getting out on the road again, but we'll see. I mean, there's so many stories to tell, aren't there?
Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, fingers crossed for us. We'll get to work again, maybe.
I'd love that. I'll watch for the next film. If you want to bring it here to Canada, let me know.
Okay.
Ken, it's been lovely speaking with you. I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of all of our audience today for taking your time to share with us your insights, your thoughts, and your advice. And I want to also send some thanks and appreciation to other people too. Just before I give you the last word, a big shout out to Brian Shingles and the team at Consortium Films who made it possible for us to license Bread and Roses for our audience. And to your assistant, Emma Lawson at 16 Films for making all the arrangements. My deep gratitude to my coworkers, Megan and Ferris. It's lovely working with you both. You're both the best. And to all the people at AUP who work behind the scenes to make our educational activities possible. So a shout out to Jamie, Lucy, Wendy, Wayne, Lindsay, Abdul, and Malcolm. Thank you. And to everyone on our call today, we'll be back for another edition of the Labor in Motion Movie Club in a few months. Until then, I'm going to leave the last word with our esteemed guest speaker, Ken.
Oh, well, thanks, Jordan. I mean, it's been a real pleasure, and thanks for showing the film. I mean, the what's the last word? I guess we have to remember we're on the right side of history. This is where history has to move, because what is different now from say 100 years ago when, you know, Marx was writing, or Lenin, or the great socialist of the past, is that now there's an end game. Now there's an end game because they are trashing the planet, and we have to win.
Yeah.
Because if we don't organize production in a way that protects the planet and protects the people who do the work and gives us a sustainable life, we are destroying the planet for our children and our grandchildren. And I think the other side know this, you know, and some of them are pushing towards fascism, which is where they go when they're in trouble. And some of them are talking about making concessions. But the only way we can change it is by collective action, by owning collectively, by planning, by respecting each other. And that means in the way we work and what we produce and how we produce it. So the first thing is we are on the right side of history. So we need that moral strength to fight hard. And the second thing is they know we're strong. That's why they keep telling us how weak we are. But you know we're strong. We know we're strong. We're strong if we're strong if we use our power collectively, and if we have a leadership that knows where it's going. If we don't have that, we're like steam escaping from a kettle. You know, we're steam escaping into the air. If we are organized with the right leadership, we're the steam that can drive a train, a motor.
Yeah.
We have the strength. We have the strength. It can dissipate or it can move things. So let's make certain we're organized, make certain we have a leadership that understands the issues and knows the way forward and is tactically astute, and know that we're on the right side of history. So we can win, folks.
Lovely. Thank you, Ken, for your time again. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Jordan.
Okay.
Really good to meet you. Good luck to everyone.
Thanks to all our audience, and
by
see you
the
again another
beauty a
time. Bye, everyone.
sudden sun discloses, and the people hear us singing bread and roses.